The period piece drama or samurai film is a genre which many filmmakers want to explore at least once in their career, with many of them even building their bodies of work just on these types of films alone. While many cite directors such as Akira Kurosawa or Masaki Kobayashi as being the most important examples of this, but just cinephiles like myself or just people familiar with Japanese culture know that the genre is a lot more varied and has a lot more names attached to it than that. And one of those names is Hideo Gosha. So I've sort of been on a Hideo Gosha binge lately. Hitokiri might be my favorite film of his now. But I also really like other films that I recently reviewed, like Hunter in the Dark, Bandit vs. Samurai Squad. There's a certain style to his films and stories that I just find so fascinating. I can only describe them as being filmed in a very dark way, and the characters are all just anti-heroes that just dwell in the criminal underworld. Just all stuff I find fascinating. And he's just one of those rare directors whose films you could just pick out just by their uniqueness alone. And he has a pretty interesting history. After his brief stint working in radio, Gosha found success at a relatively young age, directing mostly for television. And one of his biggest hits was the character series Three Outlaw Samurai. And this really impressed the heads over at Sochiku Film Studio. And then they offered him to make a film version of this storyline, and this was back in 1964. His film Three Outlaw Samurai performed really well. And to this day, it's a name very much recognized in the samurai film genre. So with Three Outlaw Samurai just being a big hit and then being followed up by just another handful of successful chanbara movies, Gosha became a really hot young name. So it's kind of surprising that his fifth and even sixth movie were just a pair of B movies, titled Samurai Wolf and Samurai Wolf 2. And both of these were shot back to back. Toei Studio, though, really meant for this film just to be a launching ground for their new star, Isao Natsuyagi. So I'm guessing they didn't really want to waste too much money on just a gamble, but they wanted someone suitably talented to make it all work. And actually the films weren't that successful when they first came out. And this is most notably just by the fact that there's no other sequels that were ever made, but did manage to get Natsuyagi's career taking off, so they succeeded in that. He would then go on to amass 189 films and TV appearances, and this is just according to IMDb. So he really kept busy right up until his death in 2013. So just despite the fact that these two films didn't really make much of an impact on release, Gosha's name alone is big enough so that we could finally get both of these two films in this beautiful new box set. And it was picked up by Eureka Films, and it's part of their Masters of Cinema series. And it's widely available, so it's pretty easy for you guys to just pick up. But I'm sure you could find these films just streaming somewhere online as well. But I will say I really like the cover of the box set. It's just very Western looking. I would say it was worth getting just for this artwork alone. But we're also getting both films, so, it was sort of a no-brainer to pick this up. So just because of that, I'm grouping both of these films into one review, in case you were wondering. But they are sort of one film because they were just shot back to back, sort of like Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. And actually a lot of the same cast is in both films. So it feels very much like it takes place in the same universe, or just one big massive film. And in case you want to watch these, I won't go too far into the plots of these two films in detail. I will just say that they follow a pretty standard chanbara setup. Basically, it follows our main hero, Akame Nozuke, and he's a wandering Ronin, masterless samurai. And in both films, he arrives in a different small town, and in both films too, he gets caught up in their troubles. Basically, these just involve corrupt officials or greedy landowners just competing for wealth and power. Again, like we haven't seen this before. And the main character I'll just call Wolf is, scruffy, good with the sword, sometimes a bragger of his skills. But deep down, he's a good-hearted man. And he really does his best to support those that he feels are in the right, while also just trying to avoid getting killed in the process. Now that I think about it, he's pretty different from Gosha's other main characters, which are more like anti-heroes. I will say this is probably the closest Gosha's main character has ever been to just being a good guy, and that alone should just be telling. But, that is interesting. So right away, you could just tell that this film is a lot like Kurosawa's Yojimbo. That's no doubt the first connection you make to this one. But also, Three Outlaw Samurai was a lot like that too, so I think Gosha really has a thing for the samurai western. And I'll just say, me personally, just talk about this as a lover of chanbara. I love samurai westerns like Kurosawa's Yojimbo. I did overall enjoy both of them. Both of them definitely are B movies. They're both really short, which I'm always a fan of. Not everything today has to be over 2 hours in length. So these are both nicely paced, and I appreciate that. And it's nice because there's not much downtime in these films. There's just plenty of action. So, genre fans will definitely be happy with this. You like old school samurai films? You gotta check this out. You'll like it. And, just as I said, along with this one being part of the chanbara genre, both of these films very much feel like spaghetti westerns. And this was very common with a lot of samurai films and their style and plots. You have to remember that samurai movies originally inspired the spaghetti western. And then that became a real craze. And then they were so popular in also Japan that the spaghetti westerns themselves then inspired the samurai films. So you could kind of say that the favor itself was returns. One inspired one and then the other inspired the other back. And this is why we have quite a few samurai films that are very much like Yojimbo, Kill, Three Outlaw Samurai. But really what impresses me the most with Samurai Wolf, I'll say, is definitely their style. And this is both just in terms of sound and vision. Gosha definitely took some inspirations from directors like Sergio Leone, and this is definitely just in the look of his films. And it's always surprising to me to see things like slow motion shots in films this old. And with the filming, there's also a lot of use of just unusual angles that you don't often see. And I'll say my favorite scene in this film uses reflections off of a katana. It's a very striking shot. But the sound is pretty great too. Gosha often cuts out elements of the audio, just emphasizing the slashes and screams. Really brings out the intensity of some of the sequences. The music then complements this, blending Murakami-like instrumentation with some pretty harsh drumming Japanese elements, and it all goes together very nicely. The swordplay and choreography is done pretty well too for the time. It's being shot and just edited with a lot of energy, you could tell. I'm also a fan of the added blood effects. That's always fun to see, especially in movies from this time period. They had to get more creative with it back then. And like I said, quite a few characters make up the cast of both films, so it helps to make both of these films feel like one, and just part of the same universe. There's also a good amount of twists and turns in both of these stories, and the films themselves are engaging just beyond style and action, even if the situations and themes are just very common and we've probably seen them already. So overall, I'll describe the Samurai Wolf films as being short, well-paced, stylish, and also just chanbara treats. And treats really is a good way to describe these movies. These aren't on the level of Gosha's darker films, which I'll say I do prefer. And I'll also say that this film isn't quite on the level of Three Outlaw Samurai. I definitely like that one more. It had a really great mix of just both light and dark themes. Samurai Wolf is more so lighthearted. And you know, sometimes you need a movie to be like that. You know, it can't all just be nihilistic all the time. You know, that gets old too. And it's just a nice ride that, you know, you can enjoy. And I'll also say too, the fact that we get two films in one package definitely bumps this one up more than what it would be just as a standalone film. You know, this is a great two-parter. So again, just very stylish, violent, to the point. Fans of the genre should definitely pick these up. And Samurai Wolf 1 and 2 are now out on Blu-ray in both the US and UK. Released by Eureka Films as part of their Eureka Masters of Cinema series. Both film transfers look very good. They're very crisp, detailed pictures. There is some dirt and damage in some spots, but you know, that goes with the old school feel. And for audio, I had no issues with that. So, you know, if you want to pick this up, it's widely available. I'll give you a link. Also, let me know if you like this film and what is your favorite Hideo Gosha film. Let me know in the comments, and like always, thanks for watching.